Okay, so this presentation is called A Complete Guide to Apex Dynamic Actions, and I'm Matt Mulvaney from Explorer. So I've got a few slides about Explorer and one about myself. So who are Explorer? We're an Oracle Platinum partner. We've got multiple awards, winners of the UK OUG Database Partner of the Year 2 years in a row. We've got dedicated Oracle teams in terms of sales, DBA services, and my team development. And we're all based in the UK, so we have a UK team of Oracle experts. And we have Oracle Engineered Systems Practice, and as you can see, celebrating over 20 years of being in business. Okay, so these are our services. I'm not going to talk through these, but I'll just leave these on for a few seconds. You can read through these. Okay, so who I am, I'm Matt Mulvaney. I've got many years of Oracle experience. All my career has been working in Oracle technologies, PL SQL, Oracle Forms and Reports for many years, but specializing over the last few years exclusively in Oracle Application Express. And the second bullet point is my main responsibilities, my main job, which is a trainer. We've got several Apex courses, speaker at events like these, I've written a blog or two, I'm a consultant, and ultimately I'm a developer. And I take opportunities like this to promote and enthuse about Oracle Apex. So this is the agenda. I'm going to cover quickly what dynamic actions are, and there's a short history. Then much of the presentation will be going through a desktop demonstration where I have, I will attempt to go through all the 25 actions. Each action, events. The events have up to 21 actions, and each action has approximately 10 attributes depending on which action it is. There's 2 bonus demos. There's also the mobile dynamic actions. So as you'll see in a moment, there are different events you can capture in a mobile interface. And the one that I really want to do is the interactive grid events. And then we'll debrief at the end. So what are dynamic actions? So they were introduced in Apex version 4. And they define complex client-side behavior declaratively. So without the need to be a semi-professional at JavaScript, so you can use the attributes through switches and declarative features to accomplish something quite easily, which was very difficult to do in prior versions of Apex. So in versions 3, for example, you had to write a lot of JavaScript to find these events and then kick off certain actions. So how it works is you specify an action which is performed when a set of conditions occur on that event. So what is a client-side behavior, and what's an example? Well, it might be a change event on an item, and you're looking for that event. The certain conditions could be when item is not null, invoke this set of actions. An action could be display an alert, or set a value, or set some styling. So you can specify which elements are affected by those actions. So you've got a good example is the set value. So the set value say, through this SQL query, I want to set these 3 values. So that's how elements are affected, and when and how they're affected through these conditions. So what are their events? So I've created a little table here, and there's 2 columns, one for the desktop interface and one for mobile interface. So the green one is where the dynamic action event is present. So in this slide, they're all available for desktop, but some are missing for mobile interface. So probably ones you'd expect, such as the mouse movement and key press and release and enter region. And I'll demo all these, in fact. And we've also got resize. So you can resize a browser and have responsive elements in there, but on a mobile, no, you can't do this. So resize is not available. Then we have framework dynamic events. So we've got the after and before refresh, works really well on classic reports, interactive reports, doesn't work on interactive grid. You've got before page submit, which I sometimes use for JavaScript validations, and you've also got the change order of the shuttle. So when you shuttle elements from left to right, you can change the order. That's an event which kicks off the change order shuttle event. And you can create your own custom events, and I'll show you examples of that. You can also use custom events to capture events emitted by JavaScript libraries as well. In 5.1, you've got new events, such as the calendar ones, the date selected event selected, and you've got a view change on the calendar. And then you've got 2 for interactive grid, although there are much more in interactive grid, especially 5.1.1, but only 2 are available. Apparently these are the most popular, but subjective. So you've got row initialization, which is really a before edit on an editable interactive grid, and then got selection change for views which support selection, multiple selection, like the grid, but not the chart view, for example. And those are available in mobile. For mobile exclusive ones, you've got scroll, swipe, tap, touch, and something called virtual click, and you've got orientation change, your landscape portrait on your phone. So let's go straight into the demonstration. Right. Okay. Okay, so we're going to work down this left-hand side, and there's several menus there, and we'll start with what I call implicit dynamic actions. So implicit dynamic actions, and the one I want to show you is the cascading LOV. So with this dynamic action, it doesn't actually show us a dynamic action, so when I click on the dynamic actions tab, you don't see it, but it's very useful and use it quite a lot for detecting a change event and then doing a refresh on affected elements. So here's the example. I've got department, which is one select list of departments. I've got employees, select list of employees, not connected at all. So HR, doesn't matter what I pick, I've got all the employees. Purchasing doesn't matter. So I want to link these up. I want to say, when you choose a department, refresh that employee select list for just the employees in that department. So what you could do is have a change dynamic action and then a refresh of the item, but even better, have a cascading LOV. So let's edit the page. Okay, so let's look at employee. Employee is a select list. So select a display of name and employee ID as a return value from employees, where the department ID is the picked department. If you've not picked a department, join it to itself. All employees, yeah? Right, I'm going to look for LOV. So cascading LOV, I want to cascade it from the parent, from department. And because that SQL, which is part of employee, includes department ID, I need to submit that into sessions, else it won't see it. So that's it. They're linked up. So I can pick a department, HR, there's HR staff, public relations, and so on. When I look at dynamic actions, there's nothing there. So this page design, I use a lot of customization, so it might look slightly different from the default. So that works fine. If I select accounting, yeah, accounting. If I select null, then there's no employees. But I've said if I didn't pick a department, I wanted to see all the employees. Well, the reason for that, and if I search on LOV again, the reason for that is this optimized refresh. So basically, in a nutshell, it says if any of the elements, like the parent elements you're subscribing from, are set to null, assume all the cascading LOVs should be null as well. So it's completely wiped that out. So some of the time, that's going to be perfect for what you need. This time, I don't want it to work. So if I pick null, then, I've got my complete list again. Yep, implicit dynamic actions. Let's move on. Change events, so, and clicks. So you know what a click is. Usually put on a button. You can see the seconds there. It's incrementing. I think we're on UK time there. For change events, here's a change of a select list. So when I change something, it changes three things. Number of countries, selected region ID, which is just the region ID of this select list, the return value, and the last updated, basically the change date. So when I choose something, it changes those. So this one we use quite frequently, like every Apex application. So looking for a change on that item, I want to set value for two elements. So for the first one, I'm going to set the affected elements, the P2 num countries. I'm going to select it to this SQL statement, so count of the countries. This is also turning the color red. So if I do this, I'll see the HTML embedded with the items. So I'm going to say escape, not escape special characters, and it comes through as red. And I've got set value of the time change, PL SQL expression, this one, the sysdate to hours, minutes, seconds, and I want to change the selection type to JavaScript expression and change the P2 last updated, which is the display item there. So this is pretty ridiculous. You would probably want to choose item and then P2 last updated. And that's advisable what you should do, but in this one, this is a complete guide to dynamic action, so I'll show you the selection types all the way through. So that's setting 2 values, but it's actually changing 3. It's because you can cascade the changes down. So, for example, on number of countries, that has got a change event on P2 num countries. And so whenever you're changing that from the change event up here, it's setting another value, and it's the region ID. So the display item there, number 4 is, well, number 1 is Europe, and number 4 is Middle East, for example. So I'm just going to use apex item. I'll show you more about that later. I'm going to get the value. I'm going to set P2 region ID. Yep. Also in that affected elements, we've also got triggering elements and event source. So not often used. Sometimes you might use them. So what are they? So I'm going to go for the example first. I'm going to put some text in, and then 2 things happen. The item that I'm changing goes red, and the background goes pink. So what has just happened? So I've got an interactive report here, and I've got a dynamic action on a change event on the report. So normally you put it on an item, but you can put it on regions as well. So if I change anything in that region, well, one thing I can change is that, then run these 2 actions. And they're both setting the style. One setting background color to be pink of the triggering element. So that's the region. The dynamic action is affected on the region, so that's the triggering element, which is going to change to pink, and then I've got set style to red on the event source. Yes, the dynamic action is associated with the region, but the change event source started with me changing the item. So that's the difference, event source and triggering element. Key events. Right, this is a classic report built by the wizard. I created a page for the wizard. It was a classic report, and it said, do you want to include a search bar? So I said yes. So I've got search bar here. If I edit this classic report region, you might be familiar with this, select some columns from customers, where the P3 search, which is my search item, the characters I type in is somewhere in first name, or it's somewhere in last name or address, or any of the fields. But I've done some customization to this. So I've removed the search button for one, and I've put a dynamic action on the search. So as I start to type, K-Y-L, Kyle or Kylie, it's dynamically changing, so I don't have to submit the page on a search, refresh, and draw with the results, or my name, like that. So how this works is, if I edit that element, I've got a dynamic action on key release. So every time a key release is I push a button down on my keyboard, pops back up, and it invokes this event. And all I'm doing is refresh. So refreshing the region search results, the classic report, which refreshes really well. So why am I using key release and not key press? Key press seems logical. Every time I press a key, like Kyle or Matt, you would expect that to be the chosen one. The difference is, what we found, for whatever reason, key press does not detect space bars, special characters, just alphas, alphanumerics. So key release works really well. Focus events. So here we've got a little form. Type my name. Okay. Click in the, I think I used tab them. Click in the name field and I get a message. Please enter your name and email address. Yep, sure. Click on there, Matt. Leave the field. So I'm losing focus now, losing focus on that item. Matt is not a valid email address. Okay, matt@gmail.com. Fine, that's working then. So I'll just show you this quickly. So item P4 name. We're going to get the focus on that item. Then we're going to execute JavaScript. So I won't go into detail about this, but this is using jQuery dialog. And you can pass in some parameters and show the message that you want to use. And also on P4 email, the opposite, I've got lose focus. When I lose focus, when I navigate away from P4 email, I want to show a dialog as well. And I'll complicate it a bit by using a regular expression. So apply the regular expression to my email address. If it matches this ginormous string, then it must be a valid email address, else show the alert. That's why when I moved away with a valid email address, it didn't show the alerts, but now it does. Mouse events. So I've got 3 regions here. One's a mouse enter and leave. Now, can you see my mouse pointer? I'm going to slowly move to the edge of that, and then as soon as I'm in, it goes light green. So I've entered that region. Or you can put it on an item, region. So move out, and the styling's gone. Let's edit that. So on mouse enter, I say mouse enter on this region, and the region's called mouse enter leave. And then, yes, it's another bit of JavaScript. So it's find the region mouse enter by its ID, then apply a light green styling to that. And just roughly, when I leave that region, I'm going to pretty harshly remove all styling from the that region there. Show that again. So by its ID, remove the attribute styling. So it removes all styling from that region, which is the light green that I've just applied. So maybe better ways of doing that, but that seems to work. With mouse move, I'm going to enter that region now. Okay, maybe I need to, that's better. So this is the XY coordinate of the mouse. You see, every time I'm moving the mouse, a dynamic action is firing. So for me, it's quite impressive because a dynamic action is firing hundreds of times now, just over a few seconds. It's firing so fast. In there, I've got a display item for this X and Y. And that only works when my mouse is in there. When I move out of the region, it's going to stop. So how this is done, I have got a mouse move event on the region, also called mouse move. In there, I'm going to set the value of PXY, which is that display item, and I'm going to use this browser element, this browser event client X and this browser event client Y. That gets my XY positions with the mouse. Yeah. So hundreds of times a second, no performance impacts there. Final one, mouse button, right? I'm going to push the left-hand button, hold it down, left press, release it, left release, right button, let go and get the menu. Same with the middle, I've got this roller, middle press, middle left. Okay, so how does this work? When, interestingly, we've only got 2 events. We've got the mouse button press and mouse button release. So how do you detect the left button or the right button or the middle? So on button press, which is the event, I've got a label called left, so I know which is which, and I use a client-side condition. Only fire this dynamic action if this browser event, remember that from the XY coordinate, this browser event button is 0. Left is 0, middle is 1, right is 2, and I've got the same thing on release. Yeah. So let's say I release the middle. It does a dynamic action, it sets the value, and this time just static, just the words middle released, and put it in a display item, mouse button, and that seems to work. You know, it might be used for that. Loading and unloading. So here I've got, this is actually a plugin, select a color, red or green, default's null. So let's pick red circle, or green. Yep, seems to work. Right, let's choose green. Now F5 this. It seems to have forgot my choice, and it seems to have forgot to draw that circle in. Let's try on red. Yep, fine, it works again. So if there only was something that could run on page load, which could set that, that circle to be the color of my value in session, well, there's an event on page load. This one's going to call, this is called PrePick Colour. It fires on page load, and basically sets it to be red or to green. So that's got a condition called never on, which is useful. If you want to temporarily disable something. So run that now. Yeah, pick green, F5, simple stuff. It fires on page load and pre-picks a color. However, there's more events which would fire on page load. So here's a similar thing. This is called page load, and all I'm going to do is put an alert out, page load alert. I've also got page unload. I've got resource load as well. So resource load fires the event when all the files are loaded into the page. So JavaScript's libraries all in there, CSS, everything, then call resource load. But it doesn't. It will fire before any widgets like the rich text editor or interactive grid, you know, populates with data or populates with text for the rich text editor. And then there's also these events as well. These events have actions which fire initialization. So let's turn all these on and think, you know, there's so many here. What order does things get fired in. So save that. In addition, page level. Execute when page loads. You can run some JavaScript there. Let's see what happens when we change all those things. So the first thing is the dynamic action for page load. That's the first thing. And then the fire on initialization on the action. So the dynamic actions fire first, then execute when page loads. That's the page level JavaScript. Finally, resource load. And let's move back to events and back on there and do it all again. But you'll see the unload fired as well. So when I navigated away from the page, it set an item on that page, which is the unload time. OK. Resize scroll. OK, this is an interesting one. So the rich text editor here, it's got lots of customizations. You can have different menus on there. Let's change the size of the browser. And let's put it to maximums so we can see it. Right, so watch the right-hand side of the browser. So it plows into the rich text editor, and I lose my scroll bar. Interesting. Then I'm losing all my text here. Then I'm losing all my buttons, and basically it's not responsive. It doesn't keep up with the width of the browser. However, I fixed this, and I fixed it through dynamic actions. So let's show a resizable one. Let's just set this up. So this is the resizable one now. Now, the same thing. I'll move the edge. You see the scroll bar wants to keep on the page. The text wants to bunch up to get in there. Even the buttons, they're trying to find a bit of space to be shown on the screen there. So how did I do this? Back to the editor. So a dynamic action on resize, looking for the browser resize. When I do this, this is... Yeah, it's just one-liner. So I'm talking to CK Editor, which is the framework behind the rich text editor, and I'm talking to it by its instance, which is the name of the item, P7 RTE resizable. Then I call the resize method. I do some mathematics here, so getting the browser width minus the navigation, which is that side navigation bar on the side here, so minus the size of that, plus 70 seems to work, and a height 400. So that keeps firing every time it's resized. So that might be an approach you might want to use. Select, dead easy. Select a piece of text. See what's happening there. As soon as I select a piece of text, it says you selected, and that's what I'll get. Scroll, right, I've got an interactive report. Now, you see the scroll bar there? I'm going right down almost to the bottom. I'm going to slow down a bit, hit the bottom, boom. So how annoying, a pop-up advert. So you can close that down, and I can do the same thing. And my advert keeps popping up. OK, so I have a scroll event now. So looking for anytime the browser scrolls. Now, I have to put a client-side condition on that. If I don't, every time I touch the scroll bar, it's going to pop up that straight away. So I only want it to pop it up when it hits the bottom, and that's what my client-side expression is. So this is basically some mathematics which says, have I hit the bottom? Or if you use scroll as well, you've got to use selection type window. Oh, it doesn't work. Did we cover everything there? Yep. OK, let's expand. Refresh and dialog. So you've probably used this, or you've probably seen it in the wizards. So we've got this Gregory, AJ. I'm going to call him Anthony. Apply changes. So in that modal, I submit the page. It runs a process called closed dialog. On this region, I have a dynamic action looking for a closed dialog event. The action, if that event is fired, is refresh that page. OK, really quick. There it is. On the region, customers, refresh customers region. I can also, going back to earlier, I can refresh triggering element. And that would work, because that dynamic action is on the report. So I can use that. That would be fine. Custom events. Here we go. We've got a little div region here. If we move this around, region is currently being dragged. I let go of it. That info region disappears. So how I get this working, on page load, I say use the draggable feature within jQuery and pass in some parameters so I can move it around. It actually stores the position as well in the browser session, which is quite good. So move it there, F5, sticks around, it's quite good. Anyway, so this is showing this info region, whether I'm dragging it or I'm stopping dragging it. So I have two custom events, drag start, looking for drag start, and I have drag stop. So drag start and drag stop are events emitted by the jQuery library, which enables this region to be draggable. And all I'm doing is, when you start, show region info. When I stop, hide region info. What is region info? It's a piece of static text which has, in bold, region is currently being dragged. That's how that works. But there's more on custom events coming up. On shuttle, right, so I've got a list of countries here, and this green box, let's put some countries across. Aha, something's happened here, so it's gone red. So what's actually happened here is when I'm shuttling things to the right, it fires the change event. Now, the change event says, are these countries in alphabetical order? If they are, green. If they're not, red. And I also have another event called order shuttle. So if I move them around and trying to fix this, yeah, it's gone back to green. So it's fixed, and I can put it out of order. Yeah, and it goes red. So a dynamic action on change. When I change the shuttle, run this PL-SQL. Yeah, this is a bit complex, but basically, when you ask for the shuttle, you get a colon-separated list of all the values. So I'm using this connect by regular expression to change it into rows. And then when I change it into rows, I can use listdag to put it back to colons, but using an order by. So I can put it in alphabetical order, fetch that into ordered shuttle, and say, is the ordered shuttle the same as what you've just got in the shuttle? Else set it to a Y or an N, then I've got something else which sets it to green or to red. Okay. So that's the change, but I've also got the same thing that wants to be run on change order. So really, in change order, I want to call that. I want to call this PL-SQL code here. So what I could do is right-click, duplicate it, drag it down, and it runs exactly the same piece of code. But I've got a code maintenance issue then, because if something changes in one place, I've got to change it in the other place as well. I could put it in the database, I guess, and call it that. So instead, I've done a different approach. So I'm calling some JavaScript code, apex event trigger, shuttle change. So I'm actually calling the change event on the shuttle, which is that. So I'm calling that piece of code. So it's now centralized in one place, just in that place. Handy. Oh, I've also got before submit. I said earlier I like to use this for validations, but in fact I'm using this just to throw the region off the page. Just put some CSS on to put that style in there. Right. Selection type and event scope. So this is the selection type. You can put a dynamic action on a region. There we go. You clicked a region. You can put one on a button. I clicked. Button clicked. An item. Fine. We know this. But we can also put it on a JavaScript as well, or a jQuery. So this is on a JavaScript. I've got 9 items here. Now some of them are grey, some of them are pink. So I'll click on a grey. Nothing happens. Click on a pink. Now, what makes it go pink is a CSS class called clickable, and that sets the background color to be pink. When I click on a pink, yeah, you got clicked on a pink. Click on a few more. Fine. Right, so let's edit. So this is a click on a JavaScript expression, and I say, when you click on anything of an input field, so you've got number fields and dates and that kind of thing, anything which is an input field. When you click on it, but only when this triggering element has class clickable. And this triggering element, what's that? Well, as soon as you click there, the help tells you which ones you can use. So this triggered element, the one you've actually clicked on, if it's got that class clickable, then we'll show that alert you clicked on a pink. Okay. So when you create a dynamic action, its default event scope is static, but you can change it to once, which means, here we go, your order's been submitted, click it again, nothing happens. Or dynamic. So dynamic you use for any dynamically rendered components. So here I've got a classic report. Let's edit that. And how this works is I'm selecting a button back with an ID of category name button, and then I'm using category name as the label, and then I'm picking ID. So when you click on a button, it says you clicked on office equipment, or you clicked on hardware 4. So this is a clicking on a dynamic element here. So this bit, for me, is quite straightforward. You click on a jQuery selector. Now, what I want to do is click on a button. You know that's what it is. It's a button. But if I say button, it says, well, which button on rendering is it? Well, it's not on rendering. It's a dynamic. It's just drawn when the records are returned. So I've got to click on a jQuery selector, and something appropriate would be the ID of that button, category name button. So when you click on that, it makes sense. So run that, still doesn't work. I need to change the event scope from the default static to dynamic. As soon as you click dynamic, it says, well, what's the static container? How do I find that? And yeah, what is it? What is the static container? Well, it's something which is always going to be rendered on the page, which is the classic report itself. So even though you've got no rows, the classic report will still be rendered on page. And I need to access it by a jQuery selector. So I use hash, which is the ID, report region. And let's just check that. That report has got that ID of report region. Yeah, fine. So that's my event setup, and the action then becomes straightforward. You clicked in alert, you clicked this trigger element, the thing you actually clicked, and .text means give me the label of the button. Yeah, that works. Conditions. Right, I've got a select list here. So yes gives me a 1 when I ask as a return value, and no is a 0. Okay, and that actually submits the page as you're changing it. So if I have it on no, and then pick the title here, nothing happens, and pick something here, nothing happens. So if I change it to yes, change the title, should get an alert. Job title selected, another one here, secondary selected. I can keep popping them up. If I pick null, then nothing happens. I don't get any new alerts. Okay, so this is using both client-side and server-side conditions. So if I change the select list, this bit's easy, change item P1 jobs, only render this dynamic action on the page if allow section is 1. So I said earlier that is a yes. So if that's a 1, render it in the markup of the page. However, only activate the true actions if the item is not null, P22 jobs 1. And I'm using a plugin, the Alertify plugin, and that's just whizzing those on the bottom there. There's more on plugins coming up. And select list 2 is quite similar as well. JavaScript API. So these dynamic actions you can set declaratively up, but you can also call them by the Apex dynamic action API. So you can read more about this on the documentation. So how this works is I'm going to take like one of these items. This one's called P13 name, and I'm going to hide it. It's gone, and then show it. It's back again, and you see it's bunching everything up. Let's get email and hide that, and hide this as well. Like hide and show. So this has no dynamic actions, completely empty. But I've also got this hide and show button. So if I click on hide, when you click this button, redirect to a URL. So the URL starts with JavaScript : So I'm about to run some JavaScript. So let's start in the middle. Apex item, which is part of the API set, and I'm passing the item name, get value. So that's getting the value of what I type in here, P13 address. Then wrap all that around with hide. So it's hiding the element, and then showing the element. And this Y means like hide the whole row. So that's how it like bunches things up. Hide and show there. Yeah, we use the API quite a bit when you've got a dynamic action and it's based on lots of conditions. You've got to look things up and then run this or run that. So it's quite handy it's there. Calling dynamic actions. Okay, so attendees. I think we've got some spare seats, more than 30, more than that. So you selected 1, 5, 15, 30. And I've been speaking for just that one. You selected 30. Okay? So these are actually calling custom events. So I've got this uSelected button. So when I click this button, it's got a click event of the button. And it's going to run some JavaScript. Now it's back to this Apex event trigger document. And I saw this in the previous presentation. Turnout. So turnout is my own name for a dynamic action. And then the third parameter is data. And the piece of data I'm sending in is just plain text. It's plain text P12 spectators. So if I call document turnout, then I can create a dynamic action, a custom one, custom document turnout, yeah? And I can call it whenever I want through that Apex event trigger. And then all this is doing is alerting the turnout selection. Now, a good thing about apex item and get value is when you ask for its value and it's a multiple selection element, like a checklist, or a shuttle, you get the result in an array. So you can just loop around the array and alert out the contents of that array. If you're using this, is it X or S, you just get the string filled with colons as well instead. Let's have a look at the second one then. So the second one is a button, and it's called How We Doing for Time Select. So the click on that one is, when you've clicked this button, select me, this is the action. Apex event trigger on P12 time, which is the checkboxes there, run the select event. The select, well, we saw earlier, select was selecting a piece of text. This is a checkbox. It's got nothing to do with selecting. So if I select it, you know, how can you select from a checkbox? Which makes it kind of perfect for my own custom events, because I can call the select action on there and have a select event on the actual checkbox, and that's got the same thing, loops around and alerts how long I've been speaking for. And instead of data, I didn't actually show you that, but instead of data, it's using this triggering element. So where the dynamic action is associated to, which is that checkbox. Or back to that custom one, I can use this data, and it tells you there to get the item name. Okay. Plugins, we've got one called Alertify. I mean, there's lots of notifications there. This is an alert. There's a confirm. Okay. There's a prompt. Enter your name. Put your name there. Yeah, there's lots of these available. Let's see how we can add dynamic actions to this interactive report. So on this interactive report, I've got a list of customers. Let's go to page 2. So we've got this Maurice on page 2. His order status is 0. So I change this in a modal dialog to 10. Press apply changes, and like, oh, what's just happened? Did it actually do anything? Maurice is, it's gone back to page 1. Got to go back to page 2 now. Maurice, he actually changed it. So I'd like to really stick around on that page instead of being thrown back to page 1 every time. So we can fix this with a dynamic action, a plugin dynamic action. So on the dialog closed event, I just do a refresh to refresh the interactive report, but it throws you back to page 1. So I'm going to change it to refresh report and keep pagination. So run that. Let's choose Maurice again. Let's choose 1. Apply. Great. It's stuck around on page 2. So this is still pretty good. Although whenever I press apply, it closes the dialog down, and I wasn't actually sure it actually did anything. So we can use yet another dynamic action plugin to show a closed dialog success message. And I'll change that to be none. Run the page. Change it back to 7. Apply changes. So we've got the dialog. We'll stick around on page 2. So by plugging dynamic actions, I think I've slightly increased the usability of that page there. Mobile events. I'm going to use I can use any type of iPhone or Android device here. Examples of swipe. Okay, so this is simulating a swipe event. So I've moved it to the left, moves left, and I can move that one and it zooms out to the right. So that's swipe. We've also got tap. Okay, I need to move that. Just off the page, but you can see how that works. Random color when I change the box. Yeah. Different dynamic actions available in mobile, different events. Okay, so plug in mobile. Right, last one then, on interactive grid. Right, I've loaded an interactive grid. Ooh, let's go back. Let's retry this. Right, loaded interactive grid. I get selection changed. Now, every time an event fires, I'm going to highlight which event has fired. Now, because there's no documentation for interactive grid and events, The best I've got is through John Snyder's How to Hack the Interactive Grid, especially the fourth part of that. So I've gone through all of the events that he mentions, and I'm displaying them on the screen. So the first one was selection change. What does that mean? Well, Gregory is selected. Okay, let's change again. So Irene, selection changed. And then we can select more, keep selecting different ones, and we get selection change fired every single time. Let's clear those. Let's change to the chart view. So if I change the chart view, I've got selection change again, because it's changed to 0. I've got view the model created true, and I've got grid view change true as well. So it's created the model, and then it's changed the view, and then the chart is reporting on that view. Okay, so you also see true for that, because it's created it the first time. It didn't create it in advance of me clicking on chart, it's created it for the first time. If I go back to the grid, you'll see also that the model is created, the view change event is created as fired, but this time it's false. It already created it the first time I went into the interaction report. And it's also got this report settings changed, and also selection changed as well. So the report settings changed, so should I save the report in the primary report, for example, then I've got all those amends that I did, maybe the default to the chart view. That's probably why it was on chart view the first time I went into it. Let's have a look at editing. So let's click the edit. So row initialization. This is one of the 2 declarative ones. So before I start to edit this, let's put some ends on the end. Let's move off that record onto my key. I've got another event, Apex end record edit 265. I can capture the primary key of the one I've just edited. I've got row initialization again because I'm now on my key, and the selection has changed to my key. That's why I get that selection changed event. So if I change that to Mike, and back again, I get the same things. Yeah? Let's clear this down. Add row. Row initialization. Although it's a blank row, it's fired again. I've initialized a new row. It's now a before edit. Whenever I save, okay. So let's change something. And press save, I get interactive grid save status success. When it's brackets, it's returning an object, and I'm looping through all the, well, basically stringifying that object and showing all the elements. So that's called interactive grid save. Although if you look at John Snyder's blog, he just says it's called save. It's not. It's called interactive grid save, and there's quite a few of them where you've got to prefix the word with interactive grid for it to actually work. Yeah, but that's the basics of it. One thing to note, you remember that Apex record end? Let's change something. You move off, and it fires. If I change something here and press save, it fires the save, but it didn't fire that record edit end again. So you might want to use that Apex record edit end again for validations, and you're bypassing it really by pressing the save. But that's something to be aware about. Okay, let's finish the presentation. So we've seen a lot of the events. We debriefed. This is the slide to debrief. We've seen a lot of the events, much of the actions. We've seen the bonus, the interactive grid events as well, and we've touched on mobile. I'll leave you with the last slide, which is our website. So it's an image of our website, and you can reach us on URL, explorer-development.uk.com, or the email address below. I'll also point you in the direction of the blog. So actually, I need the pointer. So it's right at the top. You see that? So a blog there. So we try to keep the blog updated with articles at least once a month, but in realistic terms, it's 2 to 4 times a month. Okay, great. Thank you for your time.